So 2 years ago, Paul Mitchell publicly questioned whether Newcastle's transfer policy was fit for purpose. And at the time, a lot of supporters like me jumped to Eddie Howe's defence and disagreed. But looking at this summer, was he actually seeing the bigger picture? Because the latest transfers that under Ross Wilson don't just look like two new signings. They look like a completely different recruitment strategy. Now, if you're new around here, I'm Adam. This is Two for Joy. Get down there, like, subscribe, hype, do all the good things. Make sure you hit me up in the comments, as obviously the last video I had reached over 10,000 views, the first one ever. So thank you all for that. The comments were super interesting. But I would like to say, just before we start, thank you to Christopher Hilferty 2114 for becoming a member, my first member. Thank you very much for your support. You are appreciated and valued, Christopher. Now let's get into the transfer window. So before we get into looking at the players we've currently signed, we're going to have a look at Paul Mitchell's comments to bring some context, because Paul Mitchell reported concerns that Newcastle needed a better long-term recruitment model, an emphasis that should be on signing elite young talent before they become 80 to 100 million pound players, instead of Newcastle's recruitment, which had been largely focused on buying already Premier League proven stars or players that were one level away from becoming that world elite. Now, that was Eddie Howe's recruitment model, buying players you know you can improve or who can improve the team immediately. And there's nothing wrong with that approach, but it's expensive and it leaves very little room to generate profit or financial flexibility. So looking at the last window, is it fair to say that a couple of the last transfer signings haven't really gone to plan? Newcastle have missed out on several priority targets, and some signings have impacted us negatively and haven't reached what the supporters would hope for. Now, the recruitment has often felt retractive rather than proactive, I would say, under Eddie Howe. And it left many supporters wondering whether the club actually had a clear transfer strategy. It certainly left me feeling like this. So enter Ross Wilson. Ross Wilson arrives as sporting director, and his relationship with Eddie Howe seems to be a much more softly collaborative approach, with a recruitment philosophy that actually looks very similar to what Paul Mitchell was pushing for, with young, high-ceiling, developable talent. Players who can grow dramatically over the next few years under Eddie Howe, should he still be manager. So we will look at example one, Anthony Gordon's exit, an established Premier League winger, proven England international, one of Newcastle's biggest assets, and reported to have generated around £80 million. And us replacing him with Bazoumana Touré for around £40 million. Newcastle potentially will bank around £40 million profit, replacing him for one of Europe's so-called most exciting young wide players. And Touré has been a senior international during this World Cup. He has excellent 1v1 ability, explosive pace, Bundesliga experience at only 20 years old. Now, the gamble is obvious. You know, he isn't Anthony Gordon today. But if we look at him as a whole, he could become just as good, if not better, in 2 or 3 years' time. And the question we're kind of asking is this the right direction? Is this the direction that Ross Wilson was trying to lead us down? And he had a whole host of experience and previous players that he'd signed and brought on to be the elite level. And then obviously example number two, Sandro for Tonali for, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, I've tried to look it up, is Steur. Tonali was already one of Europe's elite midfielders. I would say he was on the cusp of it before he moved to Newcastle United. So selling him for around 100 million this summer is actually, in my opinion, a good thing. We've sold a player at peak. I think Sandro has given a good account of himself at Newcastle. The fans bought in and gave a lot to Sandro during the ban. We supported him throughout the whole thing. And I would say I never felt like Sandro actually wanted to leave. I never felt like it was an intentional, he's going to push his way out of the club. But I do feel the door was always open. Sandro was always open to the move should it arise, and should Newcastle be ready to cash in on Sandro Tonali. So Steur is regarded as one of Ajax's brightest midfield prospects, along with Keith Smith. The things that I found really interesting about him is he's comfortable playing both as a 6 and an 8. He's technically supposedly outstanding. He's excellent under pressure, 2-footed, and exactly the profile that Ajax have built their reputation on producing. So what we're sacrificing today by letting Tonali go is potential for something bigger tomorrow. And this is kind of the mould that we're looking at. I find the idea of Steur coming in as quite an exciting one, if I'm honest, because I don't think he's actually been brought in, as a lot of people are saying, as the Tonali replacement. I think he's actually been brought in as a versatile midfielder that offers us something that I would say very few of our midfielders actually have, which is the being ball progressive, comfortable under pressure, and a carrier. So it looks like, should we develop his talent, it leaves us with somebody who could play as an 8 or drop in as a 10 or a 6. So it kind of depends on where Newcastle kind of see his future. And personally, I believe he'll be brought in not to be loaned straight out, but he'll be brought in kind of in the model of how we brought in Lewis Hall. I don't expect him to instantly make an impact, instantly be part of the first team, as I personally believe Lewis Miley will fill the role of Sandro Tonali, and Steur will be given the chance, probably a whole season, to develop around the first team and find his place within this core and this midfield group. The bigger picture, and this is where it gets interesting, is looking at these two deals together. Newcastle aren't simply replacing players. We're recycling assets, selling at peak value and reinvesting in potential. And this kind of maintains competitiveness. It keeps the squad fresh. It increases the financial flexibility of the club, and it builds for long-term sustainability, something we need to address, as I previously did in my last video. So does this fit with modern football? And this is kind of the point of where we're going in the Premier League. Does this allow us to fit with the modern model of football across Europe? And if you look across Europe, obviously clubs like Ajax, Benfica, Brighton have built enormous success through developing players and selling them at premium prices. I do believe this is a model that Newcastle will now start to undertake. But Newcastle now appear to be trying to combine that model with competing at the top end of football. And if they get the recruitment right, they could refresh the squad in a few years without standing still financially. That is the question, whether we'll get it right. The Eddie Howe question, which is a big one for Newcastle fans, and I'm sure you'll all agree, is probably the most fascinating part of this, is Eddie Howe preferred proven Premier League players and players he knows that can improve the team immediately in his eyes. And the latest signings, they aren't that. So the club appears to be more willing to invest in potential than certainty, or what Eddie Howe believes is certainty. And this feels much closer like Ross Wilson is moving to that long-term philosophy. And the key question here is whether Eddie Howe is fully aligned with that vision, whether Eddie Howe will allow Newcastle's potential, the youth players, to come in and grow within this team. I mean, it is essential that Newcastle look at player development as a sustainable recruitment model. And we have a few. We have Lewis Miley, who came through, who I would say is an exception to the rule because he is such a high quality player at such a young age. He's like a needle in a haystack. If you watch him every week like we do, you know that Lewis Miley will go on to be a fantastic footballer in years to come, so long as he can stay injury free and he isn't overplayed and overworked in this system. So really, the final debate of this is, as fans, 2 years ago, many people thought the recruitment model wasn't right. Today, it looks as though Newcastle are embracing it. Is this finally the transfer strategy Newcastle should have been following all along? Would you have rather kept the proven stars than bring in the potential talent? And do you believe, like me, that Newcastle should be selling at peak value and reinvesting wisely and continuously to refresh this squad with elite young players? And could this be the blueprint the blueprint that finally allows Newcastle to compete with Europe's biggest clubs over the next decade? I mean, realistically, whether it's Eddie Howe, whether it's the next manager, whether Ross Wilson stays as our sporting director, will he be the long-term vision? Like I say, it's an exciting time if you let it be an exciting time. A lot of people will say you don't win anything with youngsters, but these guys need bedding in. They will need blooding. We're not expecting instant success. But is this the right direction that the club should be heading in? Will Eddie Howe embrace the philosophy and head in the same direction as Ross Wilson? Or will we see another sporting director out the door? Like I say, let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, hype, do all of the good things. And hopefully, guys, I will see you in the next one.